Welcome to the Simple Questions Podcast. This is your host, Dylan Carnahan. You're listening to Halo by Blacklight Animals. Blacklight Animals are a psychedelic soul band out of Kansas City, featuring lush pop vocals, spaghetti western guitar riffs, psychedelic keyboards, and hip-hop drums. Their debut album, Playboys of the Western World, is out now on fire orange vinyl and available at bandcamp.com/Blacklight Animals Band. And their new cinematic single Persephone is available now on all streaming platforms. The question for this episode is, what is lucid dreaming? You will learn in this episode what you can do in lucid dreams, the benefits of lucid dreaming, and methods you can use to lucid dream. Our guest has been interviewed on national TV and radio, has been mentioned in over 45 academic papers, and is the co-author of A Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming. I introduce to you Jared Chiang-Zeizel. It is 2015. I am a junior in high school. I wake up, I walk downstairs, I brush my teeth, I undress, I get in the shower, then I notice I can't feel the water. It's odd, so I immediately, for whatever reason, instinctually try to run my hands through my hair. And when I do that, my fingertips go like right through my forehead. And I realize I'm dreaming. I suddenly jolt, I wake up. I'm disappointed because my teeth aren't brushed and I didn't take a shower. And I woke up a little bit later than I intended to. After doing some research, I realized that experience was a lucid dream. That was my introduction to lucid dreaming. But we have our expert here. We have Jared. How were you introduced to lucid dreaming? It seems like it had something to do with your cousin.
Yeah. So for better or worse, I never just got that natural lucid dream and then was able to kind of discover it on my own. It was actually told to me and introduced to me by my cousin. And he's that one cousin. We're the same age. We kind of grow up, go through all sorts of experiences together. And we lived in different states, but we talked on the phone a lot. And we were teenagers at that, probably 15 or 16. And we talked about video games a lot. And he came across lucid dreaming. I forget where, but he basically says, have you heard of this thing, lucid dreaming? I'm like, no. And he's like, it's this thing where you can go into a dream and it's like a video game. That was sort of his original pitch to me, which I was like, oh, all right, I'm down for that. And then he sort of planted that seed, and I was like, getting a little bit more curious and looking it up, and then found out that a lucid dream is is a dream in which you are aware of the surroundings and you can sort of direct the dream or your sort of character or yourself, almost like a character in a video game. And that was my first sort of taste and introduction to lucid dreaming.
How did you progress from there, from just getting that amazing sales pitch right there of just, hey, it's a video game, but when you're asleep and you can interact with it? How did you progress from there?
So at that age, and I guess it's probably around 2002 maybe, we had gotten had a family computer, and I think I would just look up blogs or people's it's probably the time of MySpace and LiveJournals, and just try to Google and ask Jeeves, I remember, what is lucid dreaming, and just see what comes up, and we just read about it, and there was material out there. It just wasn't that readily available. So it took a little bit more digging. You had to go through forums and stuff. And but ultimately started trying to implement the techniques that I was learning, and just use it pretty much just for fantasy fulfillment and fun. But then I get to college and I learned a little bit more about it, actually read some books on it, and learned that this is sort of this interaction with your dream world, which I look as an interaction with your subconscious and some stuff just kind of floating around in your brain. and started using it more for creativity. I went to film school, and we'd write out a script for the short we're making, and then I would go into the dream, have a lucid dream, and then try to create the short film that I was shooting. So it's like, oh, I want to see what this is like, and it's never like this sort of perfect image, like we see, like, I guess, behind the scenes, like 3D renderings of the Marvel action scene. It wasn't quite like to that scale. But you would get like the emotion and you kind of the feel, and then I'd wake up, write what I remembered, and and apply that to the project I was working on.
Wow, that's interesting. I know one of the things that once I kind of revisited lucid dreaming that attracted me to it was the concept of like how that could increase productivity. And like, I know as a former college athlete, baseball player, visualization was a big part. So I thought kind of this visual rehearsal aspect of performing, and you incorporated that when you were in college with your film. um so you learn about it, you start implementing it in your personal life, but ultimately, what made you decide to write a book or co-author a book about it?
So when I graduated college, I was living with four friends who I went to, actually three friends I went to school with, and then the fifth guy was a friend's buddy. But we all lived together, we all worked together, and two of the guys also lucid dream, and we would sort of just chat about it. And like, there was probably some point like we had lived together for a couple months and be like, oh, like you lucid dream, I lucid dream, and and then we would just like share our dreams in the mornings, talk about different techniques, what's working, what's helpful. And it wasn't actually until like a year after that where we're like, oh, like we all went to film school, we all like lucid dreaming. Wouldn't it be cool to do some sort of like web series about it? So it actually didn't start as a book. But then we were talking more and more, and sort of came up with this idea that like, wouldn't it be really cool to have like a guidebook to the dream world? And so originally the book was actually probably a little bit drier, in its first iteration when we were like figuring it out, because we were modeling off of actual like guidebooks, like like a field guide to the Amazon or a field guide to birds of
Oh,
North America or something. Um, and we realize a lot of the times the books are pretty like just very standard prose, not really, you know, inspiring the
the engagement
imagination.
levels not as
Yeah.
high, right?
So, we went slightly off the path that way, but we still felt like this is a guidebook to the dream world, and and treated it as such. So, which hence the name, a field guide to lucid dreaming. And it was right around the time Kickstarter was getting popular. And so we're like, oh, like maybe we can like raise a little bit of money for this, or use it as sort of like a pre-sale option. And we ended up getting hitting our goal, and then some, and we're able to sort of quit our jobs for about like 3 months, um, and just hunker down, try out all the sort of experiments. Like it's probably the only time in my life where I'll be able to say like sleeping was like part of the job, and I could like justify, taking a nap in the middle of the day or going to bed like, or though a lot of times it involved us like waking up in the middle of the night trying to see what would work. So some of the experimentation didn't always lead to the best sleep. But we wanted to figure out like what's the best way. Like the Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming isn't sort of this catalog of every way to lucid dream. It's sort of what we experienced and went through, and researched about what's the sort of the most efficient way. And like if you do it this way, what are your expectations? And if you want to try something slightly more advanced, like what can you expect from that? Um, but it was really trying to reach not unsimilar to that 15-year-old kid like myself or maybe yourself, who doesn't necessarily have access to academic journals, which there's a lot of material there, or but may or may not be interested in the slightly more spiritual side of it and that kind of new age world. We wanted something that like anyone, no matter their belief, their education level, could pick up and essentially learn how to have a lucid dream.
That's fascinating. The beginning of that. I mean, what are the odds you got three film students who are all into lucid dreaming, right? In this under the same roof, like what?
Yeah,
Like,
there's lots of moments on this journey that feel very, serendipitous. Because like, none of us had set out to write a book. And the fact that like we were able to raise the money and and ultimately what had happened is I think we pre-sold through the Kickstarter like 800 copies. We wrote the book, printed the book, shipped it out, and a literary agent who I think came across us through Kickstarter, was like, "Oh, this sounds like an interesting book. When you guys are done, please send me a copy." And she read it and was like, "Oh, like if you guys are willing to stop like selling the book on your own, we could possibly bring this to an actual publisher and kind of get out of the sort of self-publishing space." And we're like, "Oh, like we never thought we were going to be like pitching stuff to actual like publishers, but that's what ended up happening. And we worked with them to kind of fine tune the book, and their art team like redesigned the whole thing into like a much better version. I think I still have some of the old copies laying around. I'll like compare the two and be like, yeah, it was a good idea we went with them. But yeah, and, just like, and the people we've met, the interaction, even stuff like this, like, you know, being able to chat with you is something that, like, had we never probably, like, wouldn't it be cool to make some sort of web series that became a book? Like, you and I probably would have never met.
yeah, that's inspiring to hear how you brought that to fruition. It's also, incredibly there's an incredible amount of value in what you created. And I know that we've been alluding to it, but for the uninitiated, they may have some questions here. So, what is the average person's experience when they dream? You know, I brought up kind of my experience where I just had this event occur and I find out that that's a lucid experience. But what do you think the average person's experience is when they dream?
I think, well, one thing I hear sometimes is people say, "Oh, I don't dream at all." And what actually is happening is like they're not remembering their dreams. We all dream. There are a whole lot of theories about why we dream, but to my knowledge, the science community has not said like this is why we dream. Some people think it's sort of our brain working out stuff. Some people just think it's just random firings of brain synapses or something. Um, but we don't actually know 100% why we dream. And so one thing I always try to, and I'll steer back to your question. Um, One thing that I always try to say is like when someone's trying to lucid dream, often they don't even remember their dreams. And so we first start with like, spreading a dream journal, getting a better kind of relationship with that dream and that dream world. And to realize that like, oh, like tonight when you go to sleep, you're going to dream. If you don't remember it, it's not necessarily bad or good one way or the other, but that we all dream. And I would say that dreams are, kind of what people dream about is really just obviously a lot of fears, anxieties, in the form of nightmares and stuff. I think it's just also a lot of random stuff of our brain that our brain picked up throughout the day and is working through. But what I sort of think is maybe not, I don't want to say what's going on, but like what dreams are pulling from is the subconscious. And we spend obviously most of our, mental focus on our kind of conscious brain, and working through the stuff and kind of, processing everything. But then there's all this other stuff that's maybe not getting processed. So I think dreams are a way of just figuring out and, addressing either the stuff that our brain isn't looking at or some of the stuff that our brain is looking at very deeply. This, and that might be like you watch a horror movie and you're going to bed and you're thinking of like the killer coming in your room as you're drifting off to sleep, and then you have a dream about that slasher. Um, yeah, so I think to just kind of answer your question, it's a whole lot of stuff, but it's the stuff we're trying to work through, or that at least our brain feels like we should.
Yeah, a couple of things there. Firstly, you're absolutely correct. The amount of people that have said, I don't dream is astronomical, right? And from my personal experiences, you know, I have a dream and I maybe have 30 to 90 seconds to capture that. So it's fairly easy to lose those. And then I think the second thing is you're saying, most people's experiences when they dream is this kind of weird, abstract reflection of all these themes and things that have occurred, emotionally or, physically throughout the day. And I think that, if you do take the time to reflect on your day in the waking world, those themes tend to show up in your dreaming world. At least that's something that I've noticed.
Yeah, I think that, I think there is this bridge, this connection between, the waking world and the dream world. And, and we see that, again, I feel like nightmares, scary stuff, fears, insecurities, like, because it's so emotionally potent, we kind of can, tag those a little bit easier. But I do think there's this connection. This is sort of jumping way ahead into sort of more kind of advanced lucid dreaming. Um, but one thing that we talk about and kind of get to a little bit later in the book is how to utilize lucid dreams and then take what you learn there into the waking world. Whether it's like, in college where it was like, oh, let me like rehearse a movie scene and then like, write about it or, produce it or something. Um, but a lot of things, it's like, sometimes maybe you have a big presentation the next day. You can maybe rehearse the presentation, or maybe like you just need that extra boost of self-confidence. And so instead you fly around the world in your dreams and you wake up and you feel elated and confident, and maybe you head into the office and you're just that much more jazzed and secure in yourself because just hours ago you were flying, doing the impossible and feeling actually what it would be like, at least your brain's interpretation of flying. And so, like, I feel like a lot of stuff that happens in the dream world will overflow into the waking world, very similar to how stuff in the waking world will overflow into the dream world.
Interesting point there, especially, kind of that emotional aspect. You can maybe do something in your dream that emboldens you, draws some kind of emotion out that you could leverage, once you're awake. For, we're talking about lucid dreaming, we're talking about flying, we're talking about all these things, but how is, a lucid dream different than, say, a normal dream where I remember flying?
So, a lucid dream is primarily just about awareness. So we say like the definition of a lucid dream is a dream in which you are aware of the dream itself. So the same awareness that you and I have in this moment, like I know that I'm looking at a computer screen with your face, we got the headphones, like I'm pretty aware of everything that's going on right now. And a lucid dream is just having that same awareness in the dream world. So it's like you're not on this sort of this track of like just sort of absorbing and experiencing stuff. You're also aware of the experiences as they're happening. You say like, and you can identify that this is a dream. Sort of like when in your example, when you're washing your hair and your hands go through your forehead, like you're like, oh, this isn't real, this is a dream. Like that is the sort of the moment of lucidity, which we talk about in the book of like really and in all honesty, like all the techniques, all the things that you can do to increase the chances of having a lucid dream are really just about that one moment where you're like, okay, this is a dream. Because there's this inherent paradox to lucid dreaming where you're trying to find your own awareness while you're unaware of it. And so it's like you need that trigger, or there's also examples of lucid dreams called wild where you actually never let go of that awareness. And like as you're going into from waking into the dream world, your awareness of the fact that you're kind of leaving the waking world going into the dream world never leaves your mind. But a lot of lucid dreams, and I'd say the majority of them happen where you're actually unaware, something happens in the dream world, it triggers, basically you'd ask this question, am I dreaming? And and then you basically say, wait a second, like, yes, I'm dreaming. And that the moment you're like, yes, I'm dreaming, you've had a lucid dream. You don't have to worry about controlling the dream, flying, like, you might just say, yes, I'm in a lucid dream. And then often what happens is, it's such an intense experience, you wake right up. But even if that happened, even if you spent like 2 seconds there, that's still, you still had a lucid dream.
How would you describe that consciousness that, when you become lucid to someone who has never had a lucid dream before?
I would say that most of us have had the experience of like being in kind of a regular kind of unaware dream in the waking world. And I find that it, for whatever reason, it happens, and this is probably not good, but it happens when we're driving and driving somewhere we drive every day. So driving to work and you're sort of on autopilot. And, I feel like a lot of us have had this moment where like we leave, leave home, leave the office, wherever and then we get to where we're going, and we're like, oh, like I don't remember anything about that trip. Like I didn't hit anyone. I like followed all the traffic laws, but somehow like I just was unaware of it. And I think that is sort of a similar experience because like, if someone, I don't know, cut you off and you felt that emotion, you know, that stuff happens. We feel stuff in in a dream that's not lucid. But also, you can take it, you can drive from, wherever you're going and be very aware. You can be like, all right, I want to listen to that one song that's going to put me in a good mood. And then you make the sort of the decision to put that on, like pull it up on Spotify or turn to your favorite radio station. Um, or maybe it's like, a slightly more, intense example would be like you recently were in a car crash and you have these sort of, nerves about driving or being in a car. And so when you finally do get back in the car, you're probably not going to like tune out the world. You're probably going to be very, very focused on, you know, on your surroundings and what you're doing. And so looking kind of at this sort of driving a car but being unaware of it example, like that kind of to me is what a regular dream can often feel like, while a lucid dream is like you're actively aware of what's happening while you're doing it.
Yeah, that's a great example that you're driving to your destination, you're on autopilot, right?
Mhm.
And then say someone cuts you off. And that pattern break, makes you present,
That's a good point.
throughout that commute. And I
Mhm.
think that's a good example of what it's like to lucid dream. There are kind of these sequences and events that you're experiencing. And then you kind of have a pivotal moment that makes you do, say, a reality check. And then you kind of gain some level of consciousness.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I think that's yeah, a great like it's those, you know, either weird, like often weird things in the dream, like fingers going through your forehead, or something very emotionally potent. You run into someone who has passed, or in the car example, someone cuts you off and you got to slam on the brakes, and and you're all like amped up now and aware. But when sort of helping people learn how to lucid dream, we are almost trying to find those moments um, and and identify them, because sometimes it's a little challenging to identify, which why like a reality check can be the sort of or the trigger can be those the fingers going through the head, um or it can be the thing where like you've trained yourself that every time I take a shower, I'm going to ask the question, am I dreaming? And this would be suggested if a lot of your dreams were you taking a shower. But you would rehearse that in the waking world when you get in at the end of the day, or if you're a morning shower in the morning, um, asking that question, and then ultimately you've trained your mind to ask that question and associate showering with questioning, your reality, which then you follow up with, like you mentioned, like so some sort of reality check to, confirm whether you are actually in the dream world or in the waking world. I think there's that line in Inception is that, the tricky thing about dreams is like we don't when we're in them, we just assume everything is real. That's why all this fantastical stuff can happen, and we don't actually question it that often because we just assume, we're just like all, on the path, just like, oh, okay, like there's a flying elephant in the sky, just a normal day.
Yeah, no, that definitely is something that you're basically creating a habit, you know,
Mhm.
in your conscious world. That way, that habit carries over into your dream state, and that can cause that realization, right? And I think
Mhm.
one of the things that you recommend in the book is writing down your dreams, seeing what, again, much as saying like the shower, thematically, what comes up a lot, or, I keep seeing a dog or whatever, and then kind of forming a habit around, asking yourself a question or maybe performing an action like, making the timeout sign with your
Mhm.
hand, see if your fingers go through your palm, things of that nature. Yeah, and just really creating that habit and having it carry over.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, it's not unlike creating a habit in, to, exercise more. Like if you just sort of like rely on like, yeah, I'll probably exercise more now that I want to, maybe it happens, but often it doesn't. It's taking that sort of, focused intention that like, okay, I'm gonna exercise more. I'm gonna set the routine. I'm gonna do these things to make sure that, I get to the gym. It's, almost exactly the same. It's like I'm gonna set the intention to have a lucid dream. I'm gonna take the time, before going to sleep to kind of calm my mind and focus and kind of, really zero in on that. Like, I want to have a lucid dream tonight. I'm gonna take the time in the morning, even though it's, I'm half asleep, to write down that dream that you had the previous night. So yeah, I think it's like really, you know, really about building, like you said, building a habit.
Now, once you've gained that consciousness, right? And let's say you're able to, simply not immediately back up after that, experiencing that. What are things that people who lucid dream like to do once they do experience that consciousness?
So the two most common things that, first time early lucid dreamers have is flying and having sex. And it's sort of like, if probably since like, the dawn of humans, we've wanted to like fly through the skies. It's a very inherent desire, and sex, sleeping with a celebrity, sleeping with your crush, that is a very, strong desire in most of us. And so when we have that opportunity to explore it, we'll often take it. But usually after a while, flying and sex is like, there's so much more you can do. And you don't want to just like kind of stop there. It's almost just like this, we call it like fantasy fulfillment. You have a fantasy and, you fulfill it. But then you can do things like, we were talking a little earlier about like rehearsing stuff, getting, working through stuff. A lot of times, first time lucid dreamers, if they're not kind of entering it through just a curiosity, they're entering it because they suffer from like chronic nightmares, and they have a very sort of almost like toxic relationship with their dream world, which, the way I interpret it is that sort of a toxic relationship with their subconscious. They're trying to push something where there's something that's bothering them. And so a lot of times when someone who's suffering from nightmares, they will come across, either literature or, even more so now than earlier years, that therapists are kind of introducing lucid dreaming into their practice. And, having people that when they are ready to sort of confront the nightmare. So if it's sort of a classic monster chasing you, instead of running, you become lucid, you turn around and you ask the monster, like, why are you chasing me? Sometimes the monster just disappears then and it never shows up again. Sometimes the monster says something cryptic that you will sort of interpret later, that, maybe there's something in your life that you're running away from that you shouldn't be. And For almost, every single example and person I've spoken with who has, had a repeating nightmare over and over and over, and then they lucid dream and then they confront it. Like I can't think of an example where the nightmares continued after that. Maybe they have other nightmares, but that one nightmare doesn't come back again once you're able to confront it. And so kind of going back to your first question or your original question is the first lucid dreams are usually just you know fun fantasy fulfillment stuff, or would actually deep work with like the mind and the subconscious of confronting nightmares and security spheres. um and so I think those are usually the two main kind of types of dreams someone has when they first learn how to lucid dream.
Yeah, you kind of have those cotton candy experiences, right? Like I'm gonna go reenact an action movie. I'm gonna be a part of the Avengers or something like that. And then you
Exactly.
kind of have that more like I don't know how to articulate other than um I like personal experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to embolden myself for this boardroom meeting tomorrow, or maybe you know, have a lost loved one and I'm, talking through something with them, right? That's a lot more, emotional um than say kind of that fantasy fulfillment you're discussing earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, for a lot of folks who like, including myself, who start in that fantasy fulfillment space, you eventually have one of these sort of like the personal or maybe interpersonal or introspective maybe dream is a good way to phrase it. And you're like, wait a second, like this is actually beneficial. Like this is like a little bit more fascinating than flying around, my town for the 50th time. And then what I found is that people sort of graduate more towards that introspective direction because ultimately we're getting lucid dreams is this are these you know special opportunities to engage directly with your subconscious. And almost by definition, our subconscious is like apart from us, or it's the stuff that we are unaware of. And so being able to kind of bring it up and make ourselves aware of it can be a very, intense, a very profound, a very enlightening, experience.
I'm just curious, what are some, you've been on this journey of lucid dream for quite some time. What are some kind of crazy or interesting experiences that you've had while lucid dreaming?
I think I've done it now it's become a little bit more normal because I've done it a couple of times, but the first time was very wild. But I'll do this thing where I'll basically make a call to the lucid dream, whether lucid for dark Jared to appear. And so this is almost like this cliched, like shadow version of myself, a little bit more gaunt. Sometimes I can't really see, his eyes. I probably should say my eyes because it's this sort of mirrored, projection of this sort of the darker or the negative emotions I'm dealing with at the time, and basically have a conversation with him. And the first time I had it was like it felt there was something so it was like electrifying in a way that like it, very weird also, like just to be facing yourself and like, all right, we're going to talk about things. But like I felt it, and I continue to do it, especially if I'm going through something challenging in life. And it's been very beneficial. But and I should say it's something that is, while it is wild to see yourself, it is also kind of, it's not that out there. It's not like kind of completely pulling stuff out of fantasy, and I've done some of the going to alien worlds, trying out all these different things. There's a lot of exploration of the dream world. Like I love trying out different foods in the dream world, because sometimes it just tastes like nothing you've ever had in the waking world. And so all of that stuff is like really unique and exciting. But then going into something like this where you're talking directly with like your shadow self, really is this just amazing experience. And every time it happens, like like it's become more normal. It's not as shocking when I see dark Jared appear, but I always walk away like kind of, like not almost like out of breath, just out of the impact that it's had on me.
That's an incredible experience to talk to yourself and kind of those other subconscious aspects and elements, like quantified in this other person that looks just like you. Like
Yeah.
that is a crazy experience. Like, and I'm sure that that is beneficial as well. And segueing off of that, what are the benefits that you've seen of lucid dreaming? We talked earlier about, maybe the emotions you can draw out and how that can impact you in the waking world, or maybe scenarios that you can work through and rehearse um, in order to gain proficiency.
Yeah. I think the things in lucid dreams that really I think you can walk away with, like I know we talked a little bit at I liked already, but like confronting nightmares, that's something that is, has been sort of proven time and time again. It's almost like so not easy, but just like clear that when someone confronts that nightmare, they, the nightmares end up ceasing, or the nightmares change, or they feel more empowered to confront other nightmares. So that comes up probably the most as far as like, elements of healing oneself or working sort of in a more therapeutic kind of way. But I also know that, there's been more and more studies about sort of the relationship between dreams and PTSD, which, often PTSD includes a lot of nightmares. And, therapists and psychologists using lucid dreams to help patients, work on, the PTSD, and there's some, one thing, I usually say is that like, I help people learn how to lucid dream and confront stuff, but then there are, people dealing with really intense, heavy, emotions, trauma, mental disorders. And that's when like it kind of it leaves my sort of wheelhouse. Like, just want to help people wake up in their dreams. But when what I would say is that like if someone's listening to this and they find themselves, struggling with these different things, or like, oh, maybe lucid dreaming, can help me get through, you know, depression, PTSD, trauma, whatever it might be, to, seek out like a mental health professional, but ask them like in that sort of interviewing process that you might do with a therapist, like, oh, like, what are your thoughts on lucid dreaming? Have you ever, implemented this in your work? Because I think, there's just more and more information and studies coming out where, lucid dreaming and using these techniques can really, help individuals. There's even there's some sort of study, and maybe I can look it up for show notes because I'll probably not remember every last thing. Um, but that with patients who are schizophrenic, which have challenges sort of identifying sort of what is in this reality and what is perhaps a hallucination, or like an inaccurate sort of memory, to utilize different reality checking techniques to sort of like, if you see something, very much like in the dream world, we don't know, is this real? Is this not real? What's going on? And so we need to take a moment to find sort of this present awareness, and maybe do like a little check, like, does your fingers go through your palm? But to take that moment, and actually it's probably something we all could do a little bit more, and just like sit like, all right, what's going on? What's going on around me? How am I feeling internally? Am I just coasting through this day unaware, or do I need to maybe be a little bit more alert of what's going on? Am I missing information? And so, I sort of started with schizophrenia and just brought it back to the rest of us. But basically the point would be is like people who are struggling with these, intense conditions can utilize lucid dreaming, often with the help of a trained professional. But also the rest of us can use the same things and just be a little bit more engaged with the world around us, as well as like the world inside of us.
That's a lot. That's a lot. But yeah, a couple of things there that are interesting, kind of the learned reality checks. That's something that's beneficial to people. You have the confronting of nightmares or recurring nightmares that you could utilize lucid dreaming to potentially change that, whether that has some relation to PTSD or not. And as well as the benefits we've listed previously. So there's a lot of different benefits that lucid dreaming has. Now, this is something that the answer has been alluded to throughout our discussion, but I want to kind of explicitly address it, which is this: can lucid dreaming be learned, or is it something that some people naturally do?
Yeah. What we usually say is like, if you can dream, you can lucid dream, which is sort of a little tongue in cheek because we also say that everyone dreams. So, the clear answer is that yes, you can lucid dream. Um, you know, I imagine out there in the world that there's someone who just the way the brain chemistry prevents them from lucid dreaming. But I've never met a person like that. And for everything I know and they have experienced, everyone has the ability to lucid dream. Now, it's going to be a lot easier for some people than if someone hasn't remembered a dream in 10 years, they have this very disconnected relationship with their dream world. And before they even try to find like awareness in the dream, they need to start like reconnecting. And that's just done in the form of like remembering dreams. Don't worry about waking up in them, you know, flying or having sex with a celebrity. Just focus on whatever the dreams are giving you to kind of reconnect with that. Um, that said, there are some people who just naturally lucid dream. Like, it seems like I'm rather jealous that your first lucid dream it just happened. Like I had to do all these techniques and it took a while and would lucid dream for a second and wake up. Um, but yeah, one of the reasons we wanted to write the book in the first place is because we realized like this is something that we think more people should partake in, and that the introduction to it is sometimes a little challenging to find because, like we were saying before, a lot of stuff fell into the sort of academic world or sort of the new age spiritual world. And unless you were in either one of those worlds, you might not take the time to sort of go through all the material. And so the book was sort of, our version of an answer to that like, wherever you're at, if you want to lucid dream, this book can help you have your first lucid dream.
Yeah. And firstly, to address kind of the flattery there, honestly, like when I had that lucid dreaming experience, it really stuck with me, but it's something I didn't revisit for years. It was just kind of this odd event that really stuck with me. And I want to go back to that scenario you talked about with, I haven't had a dream in 10 years, Jared. I haven't dreamed in years, you know, and I want to ask you, how can you learn to lucid dream? From what I'm hearing, one of the steps is to just simply recall your dreams to begin with. And I know then we kind of talked about reality checks and other things, but, to the uninitiated, how can you learn to lucid dream?
One thing to learn how to lucid dream is like if they're listening to this podcast, they've already done the work because one of the steps is just knowing that it's possible. I've given a handful of like sort of talks and workshops and stuff, and I found there's always someone who kind of calls BS on me. And they're like, oh, like I don't know if this is real. Like, are you just making this up? Are these just really vivid dreams that you're remembering with really well? Um, and it's amazing how often that person, if it's some sort of event or convention, and I'm able to, see them the next day, it's amazing how often they come up to me to be like, I had a lucid dream last night. They didn't do any techniques, they didn't practice. They just knew, even though they tried to deny it the previous day, but they knew that it was possible. And that kind of just allowed their mind to, open up to allowing, themselves to find that awareness. Um, that said, that's probably not the most common example of someone learning how to lucid dream, especially if they've been disconnected. But if someone's like I haven't dreamed in 10 years, but I would try to say is like, oh, you actually probably have been dreaming, or I'm going to say probably actually you have been dreaming. You just haven't, you've just sort of disconnected. You've just been unaware. And depending on what the dreams are, your lifestyle, like maybe you just work a whole ton and you just don't have the time in the morning to focus in. And when you go to sleep, it's all just about like passing out and not, you just want to like turn off everything. And so if that person wants to sort of make changes and to learn how to lucid dream and say, also, don't worry about lucid dreaming right now. Just we're just gonna try to like recall your dreams. And say like there's work you can do as you're going to sleep. Set the intention like, tonight I will remember my dreams. And then really the dream journal is such like a key thing. Like there is a direct correlation between the amount of lucid dreams I have and how often I'm keeping a dream journal. If I fall like, kind of get lazy for a bit, my lucid dreams will go down. If I am like on that, it will be that much easier for me to sort of induce a lucid dream. So it's say like you do some work the night before, setting that intention, but also do that work to record the dream in the morning. You can even, use your phone and just like record a voice memo. And just, and then I would say if you record the voice memo, which I sometimes do, is then, write it down in the dream journal. Even taking the time to look through different journals, whether it's at Barnes and Noble or online, and buying a journal that, speaks to you, because it's one more thing where you're saying like a relationship with my dreams is important to me. And so I'm going to spend the extra $3 to get that slightly more ornate journal because, these journeys I go on are things that are important to me. And I want to put them in something that is like, it's not just sort of like a yellow legal pad. You don't have photo albums taped to the pages of a yellow legal pad. You buy a nice leather bound thing because that's those memories are important to us. The same way you are trying to get to this point where the memories and the experiences of the dream are also important. And so really, I like to think that we have this sort of relationship with our subconscious, with the dream world, and that, like all relationships, whether they be romantic, platonic, coworker relationship, they take, steps and energy to foster. And, if we get lazy with our relationships, often those relationships, kind of fall apart or we drift away.
Yeah, that it's again, it's another habit you have to form that, around dreaming specifically, knowing you have to keep a record, really. That's what you're doing, you're record keeping. And, I mentioned earlier, for me, it's about 30 to 90, maybe 15 to 90 seconds, and that dream is gone. I couldn't, 90 seconds after, I couldn't tell you what I've even happened. I maybe have a theme, something about, whatever, or maybe an emotion, like I'm kind of upset, or a song, something kind of just still kind of lingers outside of that. But you're absolutely correct as far as how do you form that habit. I know for me, I'm extremely odd. I have an Excel spreadsheet. I turn on my computer, I write in there, or, go to my phone, type out some things. Whatever that record keeping mechanic of storing that dream journal, it doesn't have to be a journal. It could be a voice memo, as you said. It's
Totally.
very, whatever works best for you to develop that habit, that's what you have to follow. And then, I know in your book you talk about and you've talked about experimenting with these various ways, the wake back to bed and wild technique, which is more advanced. Like, what are outside of, say, hey, Jared, I've been writing down my dreams, maybe even just talking about this. Maybe I had a lucid dream. I want to, increase the volume of that. What are some other techniques that you can take outside of just a dream journal?
Yeah, that's a great question because like there are, a lot of times you do keep that dream journal and you built that relationship, but still you're not becoming lucid. And so then there are techniques you can bring in that are basically working with how, sleep sleep cycles work and how your brain chemistry works. And you mentioned sort of a wake back to bed. And so one thing to know about just dreams in general is they occur during REM. And REM stage is like the last stage of the sleep cycle. We kind of start, up here, conscious and awake, and then we slowly drift into deep sleep, and then we go through different stages. And then as we're coming towards the end of the sleep cycle, we're getting actually very, very close to consciousness again, but we don't, or I shouldn't say conscious, we're getting very close to just waking up. So we're close to that sort of what we look at as like the barrier of consciousness. But we don't we don't surface. We just stay beneath it. And that's where, REM occurs, and that's where our dreams occur. Um, One interesting thing is that as the night goes on, as you go through the sleep cycles of your, throughout the night, your period of REM gets longer and longer. The body's main focus during sleep is like to heal, replenish, heal all the physical elements of our body, so we're able to drift down. But as the sleep cycles, the body has healed, and so now it can give a little bit more time to REM, and that's why our longest dreams are usually closer to when we wake up. So Wake Back to Bed is trying to take advantage of the fact that, after about maybe 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, and again, this depends on like the individual. We all have slightly different sleep schedules, but finding that time of the night that we, right before we have this long chunk of REM. And so the idea behind it is, we don't work, we're not lucid dreaming for the first like 6 hours out an 8 hour sleep schedule. But then we set an alarm, we wake up, we don't wake up and like get coffee and like do jumping jacks. We try to basically wake up the mind more than we wake up the body, so that, after, again, it depends on the person, but usually about 20 to 30 minutes of being awake, doing a very kind of calm activity or just focusing on the intention of having a lucid dream. We then go back into sleep. Our body goes, physically goes to sleep, but our mind is just a little bit more active, and so that when we get to the dream world, it becomes easier to spot those triggers, and kind of sort of reignite that awareness that we had, maybe just minutes before when we were awake. So Wake Back to Bed really is trying to catch that last chunk of REM.
That's interesting. One of the things that I've seen that helps with that, because some people go, Jared, you're telling me I got to set an alarm? Like, dude, I got 6 hours I need to get in. I don't even know if I'm going to get them all in. But one thing I've noticed is, it's a little funny. If you properly hydrate, if you are getting in those glasses of water as recommended on WikiHow or whatever, I mean, you're naturally going to wake up to go to the restroom. That's something I've experienced. And just by simply waking up to have to do that and then just quickly going back to bed, getting in your bed, you can kind of recalibrate or incubate kind of that expectation that you're going to dream. And that's something that you may not have to set an explicit alarm for. And so I think if you do, if you are someone that has to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, like that's something that's just, or you do wake up because you say you hear, something wakes you up. That's a good opportunity to just try that out without having to, manually set or induce that yourself.
That's a great idea. And also we probably, like, none of us drink enough water. So you're probably killing two birds with one stone. But that's it. And often when we wake up, we are, we're not waking up to go to the bathroom in those like deep sleep moments. We are waking up when we are closer to that REM stage. So, a little bit of experimentation and timing, like that could actually be far better than like the sort of jolting sound of an alarm going off. There is this method of lucid dreaming, which I've never done and I don't necessarily recommend. It's called a PILD, a P-induced lucid dream. So a WILD is a wake-induced lucid dream. We also talk about a dialed, a dream-induced lucid dream. But a PILD is, I guess, sort of a form of a dream-induced lucid dream, but a P-induced lucid dream, which basically the trigger of a lucid dream is that you have to go to the bathroom. So you drink a ton of water, and then in theory, the way it works is like you're in the dream world, going about your business. unaware, and all of a sudden you have the urge to go to the bathroom, but you're not waking up. And so in the dream, you're like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. I must be dreaming. And that's sort of supposed to be the trigger to, find that awareness. Now, if you have to go to the bathroom, it might be uncomfortable to have a lucid dream, and have, I don't think I want to talk with Dark Jared while I gotta like take a
Like, hey,
piss.
let's wrap this up real quick. I gotta
Yeah.
wake up in a couple minutes.
And of course, there is this inherent, danger to it that you are going to relieve yourself in the dream and also relieve yourself in your bed and wake up to you probably won't be writing in your dream journal that morning because you got like some sheets to
You may
throw
be
into the
drying it off. You may be throwing your
yeah
dream journal
yeah
in the dryer
exactly.
there. What you brought up wild. Um, I want to go through and talk about that because that's an interesting concept of that's an interesting technique for inducing lucid dreams.
Yeah, a wild it's such a great name because in itself it feels very wild. So the majority of lucid dreams are, before we get to wild, just explain dialed, DILD, which is just dream induced lucid dream. And that's sort of like, going back to your first lucid dream, um, your sort of the lucid dream was induced while you were already in the dream state.
Mm-hmm.
You're triggered by your fingers going to the forehead. And that's the more common version. But there's also a thing called wild, which is a wake-induced lucid dream, which relies probably a little bit more heavily on catching that REM because we're going to lose that awareness if we go into deep sleep, no matter what. But if we're close to that period of REM and we hang on to that awareness from awake, you will basically follow yourself into the dream world. And if you talk to different people, they all talk about different visuals. So for me, I fall into it's often like this purplish kind of almost warp tunnel, and I feel myself getting like pulled through something, and then it's sort of like pop, like I'm in the dream and have never lost the awareness that I had moments ago while I was awake in the waking world. Um, and this, if someone wants, they've been lucid dreaming, they want to try a wild, one of the best ways to practice it is with naps. Because a lot of times, we have the urge to take a nap because we didn't get enough sleep. And if we didn't get enough sleep, we also definitely didn't get enough REM sleep because, as we were talking before, that chunk of REM, the longest chunk of REM, is at the end of the sleep. So naps often go right into the REM stage. It's like we need to have those dreams. And so naps can be a great way to know that like, oh, I'm gonna like let me fall asleep. Often the nap is just pulling, you can't even keep your eyes open. But if you just let yourself get taken by the nap, but hang on to that awareness, and don't let it go, that can often be, that was how I had my first wild.
That's interesting. Basically, you're trying to hold on, even though you're resting, and then you're still conscious that whole time. It's kind of I I think dreaming generally is more like or going to sleep. It's more like you're just shutting down, right? And then you just reboot in the morning,
Yeah.
and all this time transpired, right? This, it's 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 interesting to hear that you can experience a dream without really losing that consciousness. And I think that brings up another question, which is what are the levels to lucid dreaming? You kind of have mentioned earlier, we talked about someone that, um, hey, I can't even remember my dreams, right? To someone that, hey, I had a lucid dream, to all the way to people that are using this wild method and maybe even meditating in their dreams.
Yeah, I say that so with like the idea of kind of levels of lucid dreaming, and really it's all I think it functions all more on like sort of a scale, the same way we can have a little bit of awareness, and sometimes have a lot of awareness, for taking the task of doing something very challenging, we're gonna put a ton of awareness into that. And with lucid dreaming, sometimes it's actually, early on, it can be challenging to put a ton of that awareness in there. It often makes us, spring awake, or we get aware and we kind of like then we go for a fly, and we're having such a good time just cruising around, we just forget that we're in a dream, and it continues without the lucidity. But I would say sort of the levels of the dream world or lucid dreaming will be different from person to person. And I think, if we wanted to have some sort of like scaling method, I would say you can base it off of sort of maybe intensity or degree of introspection. We start with fantasy fulfillment, very just sort of bodily desires. And then maybe it's like, oh, we need to confront a nightmare. That's a little bit more intense, a little bit more introspective. But then, like you said, like there are people who then, they become lucid and then they try to meditate. And, where does that take them? Even people, very inception like is like you have a lucid dream, like I want to go into another dream and have another lucid dream within the lucid dream. And just the elements of exploration and exploring one's mind. I think I would sort of categorize as the different levels of the dream world, and that it's going to be a little bit different for each one of us. Maybe there's like something like deep in your past that you've blocked out, and the deepest you can go is actually confronting that. While maybe someone's confronting something from the past right at the right from the get go, and then they're going somewhere else. So to me, and one thing I think to remind, for people to remind themselves, especially when lucid dreaming becomes maybe a little challenging or they're not having the dreams and the lucid experiences that they want, that it is this act of exploration. We know stories of explorers throughout the ages, both fictional and nonfiction, and there none of them are about, oh, it was super easy to get to the jungle and then find the gold in the jungle and we just went home. There's always challenges, but going through those challenges and embracing the idea of exploration, and then just the only difference is now we're just exploring the inner worlds of ourselves, can be really helpful in sort of maybe pushing through those difficulties. Or when you wake up and the last thing you want to do is like write down a dream, you just want to go back to sleep, to remind yourself, oh, this is part of this journey, this exploration, and that like I'm going through all these things to find something, or to experience something.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Now, there are some people that are going to be listening to this and they're still skeptical. They're still skeptical. And there's something that I think is rather interesting. And I've experienced this with a lot of different things that I've read, such as there's a book, Moonwalking with Einstein, where they talk about kind of this memory palace. Basically, there are things out there that were common a long time ago, but have atrophied and they've kind of fallen out of the collective consciousness. And one of those is lucid dreaming. So can you talk about what is the cultural significance of lucid dreaming in the past or in different cultures?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is how you like sort of fallen away from it, or become disconnected with it. Because if you look at a lot of ancient cultures, indigenous cultures, dreams play a heavy role in those societies, and often part of the morning rituals is people they sit around and they share their dreams, and they don't share them as oh, I had this crazy dream last night, it was so wacky, but they share it as an actual experience they went through. And often with when you're a little kid and you have a nightmare, the parents, oh, it's just a dream. And I don't think there's anything super inherently wrong with calming a child who's like terrified out of their mind. But what's important is maybe not to always kind of hang on to that it's just a dream element, because in the past, in these different indigenous communities and ancient cultures, it was never just a dream, it was a profound message. Often they look at it as a profound message, look at a profound message from like the gods, which obviously puts a lot more weight on it. I don't necessarily think I think dreams are kind of encompassed in ourselves. But depending on one's belief, maybe dreams are a message from the gods, and I'm just sort of too ignorant to know. But whatever sort of the belief system is, it's putting sort of this weight on that dreams are an experience that we go through. There are emotions involved, sometimes negative ones, sometimes positive ones, and that, if someone was to say like, oh, like, you know, why are dreams important and kind of disregarding everything, I would say like, I'm sure you've had a nightmare that was scary, and the fear, the tenseness that you experienced in the dream was with you when you woke up and were in the waking world. Maybe your heart might be beating faster, you might be sweaty. There are all these things that like this is, if you wanted to say dreams are nothing, this has actually happened to you in the waking world. And at least how I view it is like, whatever you think dreams are, they created something in you to feel this emotion. And that I don't think should be kind of ignored. But I do think in our modern society, we're not getting great sleep. We have a shorter attention span. We're just, inundated with so much information. And also we're just super busy. There's just more things we can do. We can always be looking something up. There's less time to just sit and be in the present moment. And often you'll find a lot of people who are lucid dreaming, if just look at the chatter on Twitter, it's a lot of teenagers and, kids and young people, because they do actually have that space to not worry about, bills and, what the office presentation they have to give. There's a little bit more play in their world, which sort of opens up like, oh, I don't have to worry about a mortgage payment. I can just enjoy this dream I'm having and become lucid. And so I think kind of, when we look towards the past, we can see that different communities, cultures, groups of people really value dreams for, in one way or another, and that we kind of devalue the dream, or like have been inundated with this sort of, oh, it's just a dream, don't worry about it. Or even when we talk about it, like, it's great to share a dream. But I would say like share it as an actual experience that you went through. Don't caveat it with like, oh, it's just something funny that occurred to me. It doesn't really matter, because I think it actually does matter. And there's part of you that wants to share it because it actually had an impact on you.
Yeah, like I think to pull out a couple things there are tangible effects from having a dream. You mentioned your heart racing. You may wake up with a certain emotion. You may be angry or sad. And those tangible experiences are part of the reason that, other cultures in the past have devoted tangible resources to make, say, a dream temple, right?
Yeah.
So it's not so foreign to see, those tangible experiences. They do have impacts, and other cultures, past societies have put quite a lot of weight. And I think we're seeing that that's kind of something that's discounted within our current society. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you, Jared. I just want to ask, where can people find a field guide to lucid dreaming and learn more about you?
So to find the book, it's at most like major bookstores. You can probably, pop into a Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon. I would say if you can see if it's at like a more indie bookstore or small publisher. Support some local businesses. And to find I guess more information about me and like other upcoming stuff, my website is just my last name, Chaing-Zeizel.com, which actually, maybe we'll include in the show notes, because
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's going to
absolutely.
get the spelling right off the bat, but it's a Chiang-Zeizel.com. So, you find more about what I'm working on, and actually the two other writers, Dylan Tuchillo and Thomas Pizel, we are currently working on another lucid dreaming project, with the publisher, Workman Publishing. So there's going to be some stuff coming up, I think, and I don't know what I can and can't share, so I'm going to err on the side of caution and be a little bit more vague. But we have some fun lucid dreaming stuff coming up.
Yeah, well, we look forward to seeing your future content as well as following your journey and looking at some of the content you already have out, and looking at where we can pick up that book that you have. So, wow, great conversation. A lot of good stuff said. Awesome to read your book and then be able to contact you and have this fascinating discussion. So, Jared, thank you for sharing your knowledge and time today. Greatly appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and thank you for bringing me on and inviting me. I think this was a really great conversation, and just a lot of good questions, a lot of good topics and stuff. And I'm more than happy to share with you and and anyone else listening to this episode.
Human evolution falling into place, keeping you tuned in through the next commercial.
That wraps up our conversation with Jared Chiang-Zeizel. We talked about the difference between a normal dream and a lucid dream, experiences you can have in a lucid dream, and ways you can increase the number of lucid dreams you have. Pick up a copy of Jared's book, A Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming, to further learn how to lucid dream. Do not forget to listen to Blacklight Animals on Spotify or Apple Music. And lastly, subscribe to the Simple Questions podcast to get notified when our latest episodes are released. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep asking questions.